This is the Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Parramatta Leagues Club, home of the Eels, and also home of Jack's Pale Ale.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. It is the tipping podcast brought to you by Ashore Strata Reports. Follow them on Instagram. And also Buddy Oldman, Masters Boxer. Give him a follow on Instagram as well. They are the proud sponsors of the Paracave Podcast tipping competition. And it is Team List Tuesday, and that means that it is a tipping podcast. And back to 8 games this weekend, with the Roosters having the bye this weekend, the week before Origin. And so that's great news. That is 8 games again to tip. And look, there is some cracking games being played this weekend. I think the first game, the Panthers and the Bulldogs, will probably be the match of the round, I think, on Thursday night. Usually Thursday nights aren't really a good game to watch, to be honest, but I think this one will be, actually. I think there will be a massive crowd out there at Commbank Stadium. Obviously, the Panthers' home ground for a couple of seasons whilst their stadium gets built. But also, too, I think the Knights and Raiders game on Friday night, that will be a pretty interesting game as well, and I guess sort of a little bit of an emotional game as well, because this round 17, is the Beanies for Brain Cancer round as well. So it all culminates up there in Newcastle on Friday. That is the, I guess you could say, spiritual home of the Beanies for Brain Cancer round, with the Mark Hughes Foundation. Mark Hughes I've had on the podcast a long time ago now, so just check out the back catalogue for his interview. But that will be a big night up there in Newcastle on Friday. Brisbane and Warriors up at Suncorp, Dragons and Eels. Anyway, let's go through them. We have as I said, it all kicks off on Thursday night at Commbank Stadium. The Panthers versus the Bulldogs, 1st versus 8th. All the Panthers Origin stars are back in action to play against the Bulldogs, who have themselves some former Panthers in their lineup as well. But Scott Sorensen, he is out for the Panthers, suspended. Paul Alamotti, Dane Laurie, Matt Eisenhuth and Trent Talau all make way for the Origin returnees. For the Bulldogs, Stephen Crichton, Max King, Kurt Mann and Matt Burton are all back on deck after missing the win of South on Origin duty. They had the bye last week, the Bulldogs. So Jacob Kiraz, he slides to the wing. Lockie Galvin, he goes to the bench, and jersey number 17. There we go. Still haven't found a spot for Lockie Galvin, but look, the Penrith Panthers, they got the victory last week over the New Zealand Warriors over there in New Zealand with their Origin stars out, but now they return. And look, this will be a cracker of a battle. If we just have a look at these team lists, I think, look, I'm just looking at the halves there. Blaze Talangi, Nathan Cleary for the Panthers, Matt Burton, Toby Sexton for the Bulldogs. Moses Leota up against Max King. Viliami Kikau and Isaiah Papali'i, Liam Martin and Jacob Preston. So there's a couple of great looking battles over there. Now, they met, this is the first time this season they have met, so it will be a different looking Bulldogs side, a different performing Bulldogs side to what went down to the Panthers 16 points to 10 last season. The form line of these two sides, well, we know that the Bulldogs, they're four wins out of their last 5, and the Panthers 3 wins and a draw out of their last 5 as well. So they're not travelling too bad as well. Both have scored about the same amount of points. The Panthers have let in about 100 more points, say 90 points more than the Bulldogs. But look, this is going to be a close game. I'm expecting a massive crowd, as I said before. Who to tip in this one? Look, I am going to tip... I will go the Bulldogs in this one. Look, I'm going an upset here. I think the Panthers, they will be tough to beat with those Origin players coming back into their side, but look, the Bulldogs, they just are playing some good footy at the moment. They had the week off last week. They'll be fresh, ready to go. I'm going to tip the Bulldogs in that one, I think. They're going to have a massive, loud crowd behind them as well. The next game of the weekend sees the Sea Eagles take on the West Tigers at Four Pines Park, and the big change there is for the Manly side anyway, is Tom Trbojevic moving to centre and Lehigh Hopewadi playing fullback. Ruben Garrick goes out to the wing. Jason Saab makes way. Big loss for Manly. Hamoli Olakawatu brings Corey Waddell into the starting side. Matt Lodge is back in the pack as well. Jazz Tavanga starts at hooker. Jake Simpkin joins the bench. And Lachlan Croker is under concussion protocols. For the Tigers, Jareem Buller, unfortunately, has been injured for them against the Raiders. I think that was like the last minute of the game, I think, last week. Heath Mason. I like the look of Heath Mason. I think he played 5'8" last week. I think he takes over at fullback. And that will probably be for the next 4 weeks, with Jareem Buller out for 4 weeks. Jerome Loy will play 5'8", his customary position. Latu Fainu is the new halfback. So look, two sides, I guess you could say, under pressure, aren't they? I mean, Manly, all the talk has been about Anthony Seibold and will he keep his job. Tom Trbojevic, the big move to the centre position. Look, everything's gone downhill for Manly ever since Daly Cherry Evans announced that he was leaving the club at the end of the year. They just sort of haven't recovered with that. Tie in Tom Trbojevic's injuries as well. The Tigers, look, they started off the season really well, but they are struggling a little bit at the moment. They only went down by 4 points last week to the Canberra Raiders, but they are just, I guess, they're not getting the wins that they think they should have. They're 0 from their last 5. The Sea Eagles are only 2 wins out of their last 5. There's not much in points scored difference. Manly 40 more points, and points conceded, the Tigers 46 more points. So, look, they're roughly about the same sort of averages there, or points scored and defence there. But, yeah, look, this is a desperate win, a desperate game for Manly, you'd have to say, wouldn't it be, to try and stay in touch with that, I guess you could say, top 4, but also the top 8 as well, as they find themselves in 10th position. At the start of the year, everyone thought they were going to go gangbusters and get into the top 4 the way they were playing. But look, I am going to tip Manly in this one. I think they will get the job done. Being at home, Tom Trbojevic, he's fired up, ready to go. I am going to go Manly in that one. That game that I mentioned before, the Newcastle Knights take on the Canberra Raiders. The Knights had a good win against the Dolphins last week, and the Raiders beat the Tigers. So, unfortunately for the Newcastle Knights, their best player so far this season, I think, and many others think as well, Fletcher Sharp, unfortunately, he's ruptured his spleen and lacerated his kidney. So, look, painful. So he's going to be out for maybe the whole year, I think. That's a pretty extensive injury. So Jackson Hastings comes in for Fletcher Sharp into the 5/8 position to partner Jack Cogger. Jacob Saifidi is back. Matt Croker, he pushes Matt Croker to the bench. So for the Raiders, Hudson Young is being rested. Simi Sasagi comes into the starting side for him. Bit of a groin issue for Hudson Young. So obviously with his Origin commitments, the club has decided to rest him. Noah Martin is the new face on the bench. So look, a team going really well. Newcastle, they would have got confidence out of that win last week. Now they're back in front of their home fans. As I said, it's for the Mark Hughes Foundation, Beanies for Brain Cancer round. It's a little bit like the old boys' day. You tend to tip Newcastle, don't you? But the return of Bradman Best last week, he had a blinder. Dom Young is back for his second game for the club. But look, I am going to tip Canberra in this one. Sorry, Lincoln from the United Podcast. I'm going to tip Canberra in this one. Just think they toughed it out last week against the Tigers. I think they can do it again against the Newcastle Knights. Brisbane and the Warriors is the next game up at Suncorp Stadium, and there will be a massive crowd at this one because that Magic round there is a lot of Warrior supporters, and no doubt there will be at this one as well. For the Brisbane Broncos, good thing for them, the same 17 that beat the Sharks last week. Unfortunately, though, for the Warriors, Dallin Watini-Zelezniak has done his ankle. Ed Cozzy comes into the side. Rocco Berry is back from a hamstring injury in the centres. And Kurt Capewell, after being rested last week, comes back into the side. So, good news for the Warriors there. Brisbane and the Warriors. Well, this is going to be interesting. Brisbane sort of let Cronulla run riot in that first half, but then came back in that second half and got the win. They won't want to do that against the Warriors in this game, that is for sure, because the Warriors, they will be disappointed they didn't beat an understrength Penrith side last week over there in front of their home crowd. The Warriors over there in New Zealand got the win earlier this year, 20 points to 18. That was a close win for them. Brisbane Broncos, they've won their last 2 games in a row. They had a bye in the middle of the Titans and Sharks games. So, yeah, effectively 3 from 3. The Warriors are 3 from 5. So, the way that they sit on the ladder now, the Warriors are in 4th spot on 24 points. The Broncos in 5th on 18 points. So, the Broncos will be desperate to get this win to get closer to that top 4. Has been 6 points off. Look, I am going to tip the Broncos in this game. I just think that confidence of being able to come from behind and beat the Sharks, as I said, they won't want to do that first half again. They'll want to come out of the blocks flying this week, even though the Warriors will have a lot of support in the stands. I just think that the Broncos, they will get a bit of confidence out of last week. They are playing at home, and they'll get the job done. Now, the next game that is played on Saturday is at 5:30pm, and it is at WIN Stadium. Unfortunately, I will not be at this game. Have to work on Saturday, so I won't be able to get down to Wollongong in time, unfortunately. But it is the Dragons taking on the Eels. So Clint Gutherson taking on his old club again. Zach Lomax taking on his old club again. So, look, it is... I've always said that the Dragons do play better down at WIN Stadium for some reason. I don't know what it is, but for the Dragons, Corey Allen, Christian Tuipulotu returns from hamstring injuries. Val Holmes is back on deck as well. And Jaden Sewer has been named to return as well. So good news for the Dragons there with Jaden Sewer named to return. For the Eels, a few changes to their side that played the Titans. Dylan Brown returns from suspension. Joash Papali goes back to the bench. Jordan Samrani, he goes into that starting centre spot with Will Penasini suspended for 3 games, and Papali, he fills the bench spot vacated by Riley Smith. He has been suspended for 2 games. Now, will this be the Eels side that will run out on Saturday? Look, more than likely. Last weekend there was a few changes late in the piece. Joey Lussick, he goes into that starting number 9 like he did last week. And Charlie Geimer is also on the bench as well for the Eels after he was on the bench last week for the Eels as well, but wasn't named in the original side. I don't think we'll see any changes. I could be completely wrong here, but I don't think we'll see many changes, if any, to that Parramatta side. For the Dragons, there has been a lot of talk about the halves, especially Kyle Flanagan. A big game for him this weekend up against Dean Hawkins, who had an absolute blinder last week against the Titans. Clint Gutherson, as I mentioned, playing against his old club. Look, the last time these two sides played, it was 23 points to 22. It was a Zach Lomax field goal that got Parramatta across the line. That was back in April. And look, the time before that, it was a crazy game, 44 points to 40 in favour of Parramatta. The Dragons, 2 wins from their last 5 games. They are under a little bit of pressure as well. Parramatta, 3 wins from their last 5 games. But they have been impressive over the journey there. The Dragons are in 11th spot on 16 points. The Eels can join them on 16 points if they get this win. So an important game for them. They will already know the results of the Tigers and Knights, who are ahead of them at the moment. So they could jump them if the results go their own way. So big game for Parramatta. They got the bye next week. Look, you guessed it, of course. Yes, I am going to tip Parramatta to get the victory, even though we know that the Dragons do play better down in Wollongong. Sorry, Flano, if you are listening to this podcast, I am going to tip Parramatta in that one. The last game on Super Saturday is the Dolphins taking on the Rabbitohs at Suncorp Stadium. Now, if you remember back in the day, when this, I think it was like round 1, I think the Cyclones was happening up in Queensland, and they had to relocate this game to Commbank Stadium. So this game would have been played at would have been played at a core stadium, I think, if it was the Rabbitohs home game, but they made it played at Commbank Stadium. That was the Rabbitohs game, and this is the Dolphins home game, which was supposed to be in round number 1, I think it was. But look, terrible news for the Dolphins with Jack Bostock, ACL injury, unfortunately out for the season, unfortunately. That is really bad news. Feel so sorry for him. Feel so sorry for anyone who gets an ACL injury. But look, 4 tries the weekend before, was absolutely flying, having a great season, and unfortunately suffered that in Perth. But some big news for the Rabbitohs with Campbell Graham returning and also Cody Walker as well. So big news for you Rabbitohs fans that might be listening to this. So Jack Whiten shifts from 5'8" to centre, and Ewan Aiken returns to the back row as well. Peter Mamazelis has been named to return as well from an elbow injury as well. So, look, some big names coming back as well there for the Rabbitohs. So, pretty timely, as you could imagine, because, look, they went down last week, 25 points to 24, played really well against the Melbourne Storm. The Dolphins, they had a loss to the Knights. The Rabbitohs, they find themselves in 16th spot on the ladder. And like Parramatta, they will be wanting to get this victory to potentially jump a few teams on that ladder and avoid that dreaded wooden spoon. The Dolphins are 3 from their last 5. Look, we all know the Dolphins can score points, plenty of points as well. The Rabbitohs they are leaking in about 70 more points than the Dolphins this season. But look, I'm going to tip the Dolphins in this one, even though those players are returning for the Rabbitohs. I'm going to tip the Dolphins. I just think they are playing a good brand of footy at the moment. They find themselves in a 9th spot, so they want to keep in touch with that top 8. And again, with results going their way, they can get into that top 8 if they do end up going on to win this game. So, look, I do like the way they're playing. Everyone is raising about Isaiah Katoa, and why wouldn't you? Great young halfback. Herbie Farnworth in the centre position as well. Look, they've got the hammer back at fullback as well. So, look, plenty of speed in their back line. Will Alex Johnston score some tries this weekend and get even closer to that Kenai Irvine record? Who knows? But I'm going to tip the Dolphins in that one nevertheless. The next game of the weekend is the just get it up here, is on Sunday. The first game on the Sunday is the Storm and Sharks, so two big rivals, you could say, these two. There's been some ding-dong battles in the past of these two, that is for sure. But this one's being played down at Amy Park, and we know how Melbourne go down there. They are another breed of team down there. But for them, Xavier Coates, big news comes back. Grant Anderson shifts to the centres in place of Jack Howarth, who has an illness. Stefano Utukamanu and Trent Liero will return to the starting side after coming from the bench last week against the Rabbitohs after that State of Origin. For the Sharkies, Oregon Kaufusi returns, being a late out last week, so some good news there. Ashley Klein is the referee. This will be a cracker of a game too. As I said, two rivals, these two sides, so have to just see how this one goes. But look, the Sharks, I can't understand the Sharks at the moment, to be honest. I mean, I have tipped them in the past and they just haven't got the job done. They lost last week against the Broncos after seemingly being in control. They beat the Dragons the week before that. They went down. They got smashed by the Warriors at home before that as well. So, look, I just can't really... There's something going on at the Sharks. I don't know what it is. A lot of pressure on Nico Hines. But is it Braden Trindle? Is it Nico Hines? Who knows? Should there be some changes? Should Nico play fullback or... stay at halfback? Who knows? I don't know what's going on there, but they are struggling at the moment. They did beat the Storm at Shark Park earlier on this year, so they know how to beat them. Can they do it down in Melbourne? I don't think they've got the greatest record against Melbourne down there. So I will tip the Melbourne Storm in this one. They have won 4 of their last 5 games, and the Sharks have only won 2 out of their last 4. So I will tip the Storm in that one. The last game of the round is... Look, this is going to be a doozy, this one, I think. The last game of the round is the Gold Coast Titans taking on the North Queensland Cowboys. Now, we talked about the Sharks been struggling of late. The Titans are on 12 points and in 17th position, last on the ladder. And the Cowboys, they're in 12th spot on 15 points. So, 2 teams really struggling at the moment to end the round. So, I don't know how this one is going to play out, but this one is at Cbus Super Stadium. And, look, the last time they met, the Cowboys touched them up, the Titans, 50 points to 18. That was at Queensland Commbank Stadium. So we know that the Cowboys can score points, but both sides, 1 win out of their last 5. They are really struggling, both of these sides. Unfortunately for the Titans, Jaden Campbell is out, suffering concussion protocols. Tom Weaver comes in at halfback. Big Tino and Mo Fotuaika are back in the starting side as they were off the bench last week against Parramatta after Origin. So Cleese Haas reverts to the bench for the Cowboys. Now, they've had to make some changes, obviously, because things were not working. So Jake Clifford goes back to 5'8". Jackson Purdue shifts to the centres. Braden Burns makes way for them. Reece Robson and Ruben Cotter, they are back after Origin. They were arrested after Origin against the Roosters, but Big JT, Jason Taumalolo, remains sidelined as well. So, look, a few changes there. They have to do something, the Cowboys. I don't know what they're going to do, but they are really struggling as well. They went on a good sort of winning one a little bit earlier on in the year, but don't know what's going on now. But the Titans, look, they can score points. I just don't know if they can score enough to... Look, I mean, look, these two sides, it's unbelievable. The points scored is 288 for the Gold Coast Titans, 286 for the Cowboys, and points conceded, it's 426 each. So, look, I think this one is a bit of a flip of the coin tip, I think. And look, I'm just going to tip the Titans simply because it's at Gold Coast. If it was at North Queensland, I'd tip the Cowboys. That's unbelievable, those stats. But anyway, and that's the last game of the round. And the Roosters have the bye, as I mentioned at the start. So my tips for this week are the Bulldogs, Sea Eagles, Raiders, Broncos, Eels, Dolphins, Storm, and Titans. So follow my tips if you dare. I'm not going very well in the tipping competition, to be honest, so I suggest you probably don't follow my tips, to be honest. But anyway, good luck in your tipping competitions, and may your team win. And thank you very much for listening to the Parramatta Podcast, tipping podcast, proudly brought to you by Assure Strata Reports and also Buddy Oldman Masters Boxer. Both, give them a follow, both on Instagram as well. The Parramatta Podcast, by the fan, for the fans. Go Para! How you going, mate? Are you a Parramatta Podcast listener?
I am, bro. Okay. It's a great podcast. Everyone tune in.
Go Para!
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Parramatta Podcast. See you next time.